Today is Monday, the 17th of August. A lot is going on in the world because the MOU that was executed, signed between Donald Trump and Iran, mediated by Pakistan, Field Marshal Asim Munir, and everybody thought it was the beginning of the end of this conflict, has actually come to an end by itself, with Trump threatening to use nuclear weapons. Now, that horrible news has been sourced to two credible sources, one of them being the Chief of Staff, Joint Chiefs, uh, Mr. Kane, and the other being Marjorie Taylor Greene. So, to make sense of all of that, we are delighted, we are honored to have one of our senior contributors, Alex Krainer, here, who has kindly agreed to appear midstream because this is not his regular day, and give you his thoughts. This is transition protocol. We bring you the news that drives the news underneath the surface currents that nobody else sees. We see because we are deeply sourced, and we are honored that people from all over the world watch us and are watching us in growing numbers. So if you like what we are doing, kindly hit the like, subscribe button. Go to Substack, same name, become a paid member for $5 a month. And we will deliver all of this inside your mailbox twice a week. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, unfortunately, I cannot say that I'm surprised because we've already heard, um, let's call it unconfirmed news, that Trump was um, asking his military brass about dropping the bomb, and he was rebuffed. But um, what it tells us is that they are out of options and that they have been defeated. And there's only one way to maybe reverse that defeat, and that would be to launch a nuclear attack against Iran. So the fact that this is being discussed is a very telling um, piece of news, and it looks very negative for United States Israel axis, and it tells us that Iran has in fact scored a strategic victory over the United States. Of course, that doesn't mean that the war ends yesterday, but it does mean that the United States is out of options. And I think that another piece of almost equally relevant news have been the reports about very low morale among U.S. troops, about very poor state of their arsenal and their ships, and about the fact that the U.S. troops apparently uh, believe that they are being sent to war for Israel, that this has nothing to do with the United States, with U.S. interests, nothing that they signed up for. And I think that that has to qualify all those things people say almost automatically, the most powerful military in the world, the greatest navy in the world, blah blah blah, all these things that they say. If your troops don't want to fight a war, if they don't believe in the mission, then what you have is a wet noodle, and if you're pushing on a wet noodle, it doesn't do much.
Well, Alex, that is in fact confirmed news, and everything that you have said is in fact true. As our uh, people who watch us from across the globe know, we have deep insight into Iran. In fact, we have insight into some very powerful circles in Iran, and we have deep insight in Islamabad, Pakistan, and by virtue of that, we have insight into the region. And of course, through military observers like our contributing member, founding member, Larry Johnson, we have insight into the United States military. So let's start with Iran. Uh, we have reported on this channel, and we are very confident in that reporting. And in fact, I have actually personally spoken with people who know about this. Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei has now emerged out of his retirement that was forced upon him because of the injuries that he sustained. Surprise attack that killed his father, killed his wife, killed his daughter, killed a whole bunch of other people. He has now emerged rehabilitated, so to speak. He's back in health, back in strength, and the most important thing that he did, the first thing that he really did to consolidate power, is to appoint somebody who is deeply respected in the IRGC, uh, deeply respected across all civilian authority in Iran, Mohsen Rezaei, General Mohsen Rezaei. And that is a very significant appointment. And Mohsen Rezaei is on the same page as Mojtaba Khamenei. And one of the first meetings that Mohsen Rezaei took after he came back into a position of authority is to meet with Mohsen Naqvi of Pakistan. Mohsen Naqvi is very closely allied with Field Marshal Asim Munir. Mohsen Naqvi is related to Sajid Naqvi, Allama Sajid Naqvi, that is like almost like uh, an Ayatollah in Pakistan, Shiite circles, 40 million people. He's related to that person and very deeply respected in Iran. So one of the first meetings took place between Mohsen Rezaei and us and Mohsen Naqvi. What does that mean? It means that Pakistan and Iran, as we have reported repeatedly, are very closely tied. Very closely tied. So for Trump to think, and Pakistan represents China, no question about it. For him to think that he can just simply throw a nuclear bomb and just forget about it, as he has done all his life with the Bulgarian criminality that he has been engaged in, and that will not have astounding impact on all of the world is something that just boggles my mind. And and we reported that earlier when he discussed it with the chief of staff, Joint Chiefs Dan Kane. He discussed it again, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene says that it happened as recently as a couple of days ago when he was in Camp David. So, do you see this actually happening?
Uh, Forgive me. Do I see them dropping a
Uh,
nuke?
yes, a nuclear bomb.
Uh, I do not, but I think that I could I could end up being surprised. I think that dropping a nuclear bomb would be so completely unjustifiable in the eyes of not only of the world but also of the American public that it would it would be a it would be more than a political suicide of the Trump administration. It would be a political and moral suicide. It would be a moral suicide of the West. And I think that it would not fracture the West. I think it would splinter it and destroy all of the alliances because it would destroy the sense of unity, the all these fairy tales about shared values. It would kill the legitimacy of Western governments in the eyes of their own people, and I think that it would turn the United States into a pariah. This was done at the end of World War II, when the United States dropped two nuclear bombs on Japan. But back then we didn't have social media, we didn't have the internet. The horrors of what happened there could be uh, let's say that the fallout could be controlled. This is not possible today, and so it would be the worst, ugliest, and possibly terminal suicide of the United States, meaning there will be no coming back from this to say, ah, yeah, we are the leader of the free world. Well, we had to, what they said about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that they dropped the bomb to save lives.
Of
Actually,
course.
to because if they didn't drop the bomb, then a lot more lives would be lost. I don't think that they would be able to peddle such narratives this time around, and I think that obviously it would massively increase the sympathies of the world, not only for Iran, but also for Iran's axis of resistance, because it would make it obvious what they're up against, what they're fighting against, and why they're fighting against. Because, Iranians kind of have a saying that the United States is the great Satan. And I think that with this, Trump would prove them completely correct in that.
Well, according to our reporting, this is specific to transition protocol. Iran is days away from actually mounting a nuclear device on a missile that it has received from China or Russia or both or and North Korea, and days away, literally days away, and they have a contingency plan. As the world has seen, they are extraordinarily well planned. This war has been executed to a T in terms of planning. So, according to my reporting, uh, if such catastrophe was to take place, Iran would retain sufficient power to fire back and to launch multiple missiles equipped with nuclear bombs, at least nine. And I don't think Israel would survive that assault. I don't think a bunch of other places would survive that kind of assault. So I'm shocked that there are not enough more adults in the room who can control this Bulgarian.
I think that the adults have been systematically purged from the administration. That's the problem. So you have there uh, people who are people who are probably not qualified to be in the position that they are, and to me they come across like a high school club of mean kids,
Yes.
who have messed up very badly, who cannot contain the consequences of their blunder, and who are now so desperate to uh, somehow finagle a victory and draw it from the jaws of this humiliating defeat, that they're just going over every line that they shouldn't go over. But the reason why I don't see this actually happening is because below them there's a whole hierarchy of people who are actually competent, who actually understand what they're doing, and who will almost certainly put in stiff resistance, even if an order comes, we're going to launch nuclear bombs against Iran. I think that the military will resist it and will push back. We've seen this happen before. In I think it was at some point in 2024 that Benjamin Netanyahu. I think it was Benjamin Netanyahu, but maybe it was other Israeli officials came to the United States with a. No, it was the British. I'm sorry, it was the British. It was Keir Starmer with his government that came to see Joe Biden uh, in at the White House, and they turned up with a list of targets inside Russia that they wanted the United States to strike with long range weapons, and the military brass says, "Sorry, we're not doing this," and the whole plan was stopped there. So there's precedent for that. The military running a very big show, a very big operation with big expensive systems and weapons and troops and the whole thing. You have to have competent people. You cannot have high school mean kids running that as well. And so that's where I hope that the corrective action will come from.
Well, I mean, let's hope that happens. So, I mean, that's the positive side, of course. So, if it happens, let's say, Alex, that these mean kids, I would not call them kids, I would call them toddlers, malignant toddlers. Let us say they are stopped. So, how does Trump get out of this mess?
I Zulfiqar, I have to say, I don't think he does. I think there's no getting out of this mess. And I think, in fact, I have the impression, let's say, these are early days, but I have the impression that people who really are in power have already decided to drag Trump through the mud and then push him under the bus. Because I'm hearing more and more, you know, talk and narrative about Trump um, in very poor, very bad light. And I've recently watched an interview with like a former, Israeli intelligence asset. His name is Aviv, Yuval Aviv, and I would recommend your viewers to. I think it was on the Danny Jones podcast. It's a 3 hour thing, but it's worth listening to very carefully and twice because he's very negative on Trump, but he's very negative in a way that you're immediately seeing that he knows stuff. Obviously, he knows something, and I think that Trump has been designated for the dustbin, for the political dustbin, and I think that this talk, this reporting, these rumors, the public relations push is probably going to be gaining momentum over the coming months, and who knows, maybe Trump will end up even having to resign in disgrace.
Well, that would be a day to rejoice, of course. That happens. You have in our earlier shows, Alex, and with deep insight, talked about this London club, so to speak, this malignant club, evil club that controls what goes on in the United States and the West. Is this related to that? The people have
Uh,
decided.
I believe so. Only it's very hard to discern exactly how the fault lines are arranged because it seems to me that there are two factions there. Maybe not at the very top, but at the managerial level, that there are two factions, and one obviously is the great big Zionist project, and everybody who is passionately devoted to that side. But another one, I wouldn't know what to call it. I call them the Trotskyites because their undying obsession is Russia, and they're not, like they're not completely in opposition to each other, but it seems to me that there's disagreement among them about what what is the top priority. What is the priority? Is it Israel and Iran, or is it Ukraine and Russia? And so it seems to me that there's a at that level, so not from the top of the pyramid, but at that managerial level, there's disagreement about who should be in charge because one side wants all the efforts to be focused on helping Ukraine and destroying Russia, and another faction wants all the efforts to be focused on destroying Iran and helping Israel. Uh, I'm convinced that both factions pray at the altar of the City of London and pledge their allegiance to the City of London in various ways. Uh, and it's almost possible to say who is who because you have people like Obama, Susan Rice, uh, mm, Mark Carney, a bunch of European leaders, and so forth, who don't want to have anything to do with the war against Iran, but who want to drag the United States in any way possible into the war against Russia. And then obviously there's Trump and his cabinet and the whole Zionist cabal in the United States who are not keen on wasting their resources on fighting Russia and um, who want to fight Iran and destroy it. Um, I think that the fact that there's opposition at that level may also tell us who is in a position to work against Trump and to drag him through the mud over the coming months, and who might want to be in power again because maybe they'll say like, okay, let's do some new JCPOA with Iran. Let's like sweep that under the carpet, and let's turn our attentions again to Ukraine and Russia. And I believe that the city of London is in the end always in charge, and it's strange. It's I think it's very difficult to trace the the command and control hierarchy from there because it's obviously not it's not the legitimate structures of governments that are actually in charge. And in fact, this interesting interview with Yuval Aviv, he's actually explicitly saying that there's a parallel government that's really in charge, that Trump is not in charge. And why does he say that? Because he's part of it, or at least he has been part of it. But he tries to convey the impression that he was once at some point part of it because they hired him to do some special operations for them. But then if you listen very carefully, a lot of what he says implies that he's still part of it and that he knows the people who are involved. And he kind of speaks scornfully about Trump as, yeah, Trump is like a joke. He's like the court jester who is there to occupy the media and to attract the public attention, while the grown-ups are doing the real work. And then he also says that these special assignments that he has been involved with had to do with Iran, had to do with Iranian nuclear program, elimination of Iranian officials and nuclear scientists. And so I think that if there was a one person who should maybe be subjected to some enhanced interrogation, I would include this guy.
Where is he at? Is he still in Israel or London
No, I
some,
think he's in New York. I think he's in the United States. He's a U.S. citizen. He has a
the
full
U.S.
story
citizen?
about how he became U.S. citizen and how he defected from the Mossad and how they tried to get him back, but then he was able to fight them back and so on. By the way, he's the guy. Uh, you remember Steven Spielberg's film, Munich?
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, Munich was based on Yuval Aviv's story, so he's
Really?
he's that guy.
Oh my God. That high up, huh?
Yeah, yeah. It seems that he's pretty high up, but still the managerial level, and maybe even because he mentions who are people in this shadow government, and he mentions people like George Bush Sr. and Dick Cheney, and he says like, in fact, it was Dick Cheney who recruited me and who brought me in to take on these special assignments. And then he doesn't name any other names because he says that he doesn't even know all the names, but he says like these people meet once, twice a month, and they decide the future of America. They decide what's going to be done and what's not going to be done. Trump is there to entertain the public and keep their heads catch on fire.
Hmm. Well, I mean, this is the reason why we love you on this channel, Alex, because you have such depth, such extraordinary depth of understanding uh, about events that are driving us, literally driving the geopolitical landscape. And most people just have no clue. I mean, they think that Trump is running everything, and they're horrified that this court jester, I mean, that's a kind word for Trump, uh, this buffoon is actually in charge, and they think that, well, maybe his bumbling is the one that is going to get us in trouble. But no, no, it is as the dark hand that controls him. So where does this go from here, Alex?
I think it's going to lead to profound political crisis in the United States and the remaining G7 countries. So Britain, France, Germany, Japan, um, and possibly some other countries, maybe Canada. Um, I think that unfortunately, it's going to lead us into a period of a reign of terror, because the people in power don't relinquish power voluntarily, and they certainly don't allow democracy to interfere with their plans or allow democracy to jeopardize their hold on power. So they, if we read history, if we take history as a precedent, they resort to terrorism, they resort to assassinations, they resort to very heavy handed oppression, um, censorship, um, kind of Orwellianism that in the end, I think we already see take shape and accelerate. What we haven't seen yet in such large numbers is plenty of assassinations. But for example, in Germany in the 1930s, when there was this uh, great fight for power between the Nazi faction and other democratic options in Germany, thousands of government officials were assassinated, and then together with judges and generals and journalists and so forth, I think the the victims were in the tens of thousands. And I think that unfortunately this is probably coming to the European and countries and the US. Well, we already had some unexplained deaths when when the AfD in Germany had regional elections in Westphalia, and then for no discernible reasons, seven of their candidates dropped dead in a period of just a few weeks around the election time. So I suspect that this might be part of it. NATO has long and honored track record in terrorism. Their Operation Gladio is a matter of record. It's not a conspiracy theory. It was basically a terrorist initiative, particularly wielded against Germany and Italy and Belgium to a lesser extent, when there was the danger that maybe these countries might fall under how do you call it, communist type governments. And then you even had kidnapping of Italian Prime Minister Aldo Moro. In Germany, yeah, there were bombings of train stations in Bologna with, I think, close to 100 casualties. We had bombings of nightclubs in Germany. Um, in 1989, we had the assassination of Alfred Herrhausen, who was the CEO of the bank of Deutsche Bank, and who was a very close advisor to Helmut Kohl, then Chancellor, because when the Berlin Wall fell, Herrhausen had a very different development strategy for Germany, and he wanted exactly for Germany to reach out to Russia and to create a kind of partnership where German technology with Russian resources would lead to a type of development that would maybe bring together the Eurasian continent in a different way than the Anglo-Saxon quote unquote elites had in mind. So he was eliminated. He simply, they they bombed his car and he died. And so these kinds of methods are probably going to make a comeback.
On behalf of the United States and NATO and so forth, and the Western countries.
Well, I would say on behalf of the probably the shadow governments that run the United States and the rest of the NATO countries.
How horrible. How horrible. Well, in light of all that, what do you make of the Mecca Agreement?
Well, it seems that Mecca agreement is for real, and it seems that Trump finally came out and said something about it.
That
And it
frightens me. That
well, but
frightens me.
I think he was embarrassed into doing so because these all these countries are at least formally allied with the United States. They're allies and friends. The fact that Trump was completely out of the loop is profoundly embarrassing, and so he had to come out and say something. And obviously, he cannot threaten Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and Turkey while he's at war in against Iran. So he had to make a complimentary. But even Trump didn't imply that he had anything to do with this, or that it was that the United States brokered it, that he brokered it, that he has any control over it. He just kind of made um, an approving Truth Social post about it. But you know, clearly Iran is not nervous about it, which is interesting, and I think that it is step by step, without the involvement of Western partners, taking us towards a new security architecture for Western Asia. And as you noted, uh, Pakistan cooperates closely with China. Uh,
Very closely.
China and Russia have been explicit and vocal about the continent needing a new security architecture because what we had for the last 200 years has been British divide and rule, pitting country against country, keeping them constantly at war so that they depend on you for financial loans and for weapons. And so, uh, keeping the whole region running with blood nonstop was suiting the geopolitical objectives of the Western colonial powers. And I think that this is the first, well, apart from Iran defeating the United States, I think that this is the first uh, foundational stone of this security architecture actually shaping up. And other than just, unfortunately, I haven't read the text of the agreement yet. I only read the public, the the press release that was published, which was very short. But it seems that a real organization is starting to take shape with joint secretariat and offices and uh, some form of a decision making hierarchy starting to take shape. So I think this is all a good thing because none of these countries, given that they're there, that they are there in that region, that's where they have to you know reckon with their neighbors and their varying interests and so forth. They're the ones driving this development, and none of them have interest in being at war with each other at all times. So I think that ultimately, probably uh, Egypt is going to join, and I think that ultimately Iran is also going to join, or at least I'm certain that Iran will find a constructive way of cooperating with this new alliance.
Well, my understanding is that Iran was fully briefed throughout the process by Pakistan, and Iran was also informed that very soon they will be invited in some capacity. It could be an observer capacity, it could be a member capacity, it could be, an important capacity. So while all of this city of London Hall of Horrors unveils itself, we have the countervailing powers as you have described with China, Russia, Western Asia, Iran, particularly Pakistan. uh, beginning to take shape. So, do you not see a strong conflict between these two?
I'm sorry, between who?
Between Iran, Pakistan, China, Russia as a bloc, and the city of London with Israel and Zionist as a bloc.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what I believe the whole conflict is about. I uh, since 2021, that is the year when George Soros went to Davos and gave one of his last annual addresses to the gathering of the World Economic Forum. And he said that what we're experiencing today is a conflict between two systems of governance, right? And I think that this is the 30,000-foot view that has to be always kept in mind if you even have a hope of knowing how to interpret what's going on in the world today. And basically, George Soros and other people, they'll characterize this conflict as a conflict between open societies and closed societies, or most other people say that it's between democracies and autocracies, or dictatorships and so forth. But what it is actually is a conflict between Western colonialist powers and Western empire, because colonialism and empire are basically the same thing, and the whole rest of the world. Whoever refuses to be subjugated to the Western empire. That's the conflict. And so uh, countries that refuse to be subjugated right now are relatively few, but they're very determined. We have Russia, Belarus, we have China, North Korea, we have Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, not so much anymore, but Venezuela was on that list. And they all understand that the means and methods that the Western Empire employs is should not be underestimated. So they are increasingly sticking together, and I think that they are increasingly regarding mutual aid, coordination, cooperation as existential, because either they fight this parasite together, or they get picked off one by one. And when I say parasite, the reason why I say this is because Western powers don't need to defeat all these countries militarily. They don't have to, like the Napoleon, send an invasion force against Russia and then defeat it militarily, or like Hitler. It's enough for them to engineer a regime change somehow, and they can do that either as they did it in Venezuela, just like an elegant kidnapping and replacement, or it can be a color revolution like Ukraine and so forth. And nobody should feel that they're immune to that, because these people never stop. Uh, they are capable of working for a decade or two to put pieces in place. Who knows how long they've been planning the overthrow of the Iranian government. But we know that it's been many years that they've been setting up, MI6, CIA, Mossad assets on the ground in Iran. That they even had, they had safe houses, weapons caches. They even had production of drones. They brought in Starlink terminals and so forth. So this took time to set all this up, and then you can wait for some kind of a crisis, for an economic crisis, for maybe Vladimir Putin falls ill, or he dies, and then you activate the whole thing, and you bring in some kind of a Zelensky, and then what you do is, if you bring a Russian version of Zelensky into the Kremlin, then you would use Russia against China in the same way that you use Ukraine against Russia. So all these countries have an existential stake in supporting one another and cooperating with one another. And I think that they're very serious about this. I think that they have understood the means and methods of the Western Empire, And I think that they are now actively counteracting it, and that they're actively pushing back rather than just passively, trying to contain them. And so I think that this conflict between two systems, it it has to go all the way. And I think it has to go to the point where you get to these shadow governments, and whoever is keeping them in their employment, and you have to totally and completely disenfranchise them. And that then brings us back to the petrodollar and the eurodollar system, because that's the glue that holds this whole monster together.
Incredible analysis, Alex. Incredible analysis. Fascinating. Do you not see then the petrodollar regime collapsing? I mean, this is not going to be sustained.
Uh, yes, but I think that collapsing is maybe too strong a word, because it implies that it's just going to come down like a house of cards. I think it'll take time, but I think it's being because what is petrodollar? What are euro dollars? It's based on trade, on global trade, right? It's that money is being used as a trade settlement currency, and so you have a lot of contracts for supply of crude oil and natural gas and wheat and corn and soybeans and all of these things. And these contracts have been signed probably on a revolving basis, maybe multi-year contracts. They're priced in US dollars, they're denominated in US dollars. And, they serve their own purpose. The companies that are running these businesses, they have their managers. There's a degree of ossification in these trade flows. People are not going to start tearing up these contracts and rewriting them in yuan, creating brand new banking relationships. It's a you have to decide to do this, and generally you don't want to change if you're sitting and you're running a, let's say, a lucrative business, and all it takes is just a phone call. Well, we have a 20,000 ton shipment, loading next month. The whole thing, it generates a lot of paperwork. It takes quite a bit of know-how to run this. You have to charter ships, you have to write charter parties, you have to load the ships, the bills of lading, like a stack of documents.
Yes, yes,
It's
yes.
exchanged with banks that finance the deal, because nobody has the cash to pay like a $300 million cargo. Banks have to intermediate. So all these relationships are, let's say that there's a resistance to change. They're ossified to a certain extent, and it will take time for those relationships to be replaced with new relationships. Companies are not going to tear up the contracts and rewrite them in yuan. It's going to have to be new companies, new businesses that are going to um, push out the old ones, I believe. And so I think that uh, as long as the old methods and old relationships continue to provide us most of our supplies of wheat and corn and gas and oil and so forth, um, the US dollar is going to have its place as a global trade settlement currency. And that means primarily petrodollar and eurodollar. Uh, but over time, over time, I think it's going to be whittled away. It's going to be whittled away, and the the part that's going to accelerate this process is going to be inflation. Because inflation, I think there's no doubt that inflation is going to take off again. Uh, it's probably going to reach maybe double digits again. And I think that once the US dollar starts to lose its purchasing power, then the incentive to replace the old relationships and create the new relationships is going to make more sense. And then we can see maybe not a collapse, but an accelerating transition.
How long do you think this will take?
Huh. I would give it a 5 to 10 year time frame.
That would have been my guess as well. I mean, I'm old enough to
But it's a,
remember.
yeah, you're right. That's a guess because
Yeah.
nobody can predict this.
Well, but I think it's an intelligent guess. I think it is a very good guess. And I'm old enough to remember. I was just beginning to say that when pound sterling was what the British, what the U.S. dollar is today, and who cares about pound sterling anymore? Uh, I mean, increasingly less and less and less and less, and
Yeah.
that happened, rather quickly after World War One, not after World War Two. World War One was the accelerant that caused it to, go deep dive, and then by the end of the Second World War, it was over. So these people are. I'm talking about Trump and the cabal that is around surrounding him. I mean, they are in a state of hubris, and anybody reading history, civilizational history, eh, eh, will recognize that hubris does not last. One thing about hubris, it always ends up, biting dust.
Well, you end up flying too close to the sun until the wax in your wings melts. And that's, you can
Yes.
read history, you can also read Greek mythology and the story about, what's his face? Not Oedipus, I was going to say Oedipus. Icarus, who flew too close to the sun. And I think that we see that again and again and again. Uh, that's hubris, and that's what ultimately causes runs the whole juggernaut into a terminal phase. And terminal phase is when they are at their most dangerous because they're becoming reckless, and we see that in these White House meetings where the mean kids are discussing, hey, let's just nuke Iran and get it over with.
Yeah. Except that it's not going to get over with. It'll just start a new cycle of catastrophic, you know, catastrophes.
Yes, but they
Catastrophe.
they don't necessarily know this. They're stupid. They're stupid, Zulfiqar. I'm convinced that they're stupid. They don't know this, and they think that they will just turn Iran into a green glass parking lot, and then they're going to declare victory and say, "Well, okay, now we're in charge again."
No,
They
the Strait
don't.
of Hormuz
You know,
can
I
start.
don't think that they think consequences. They don't think like, let's think of a few moves ahead. They don't even play checkers, as they say. They pretty much play whack-a-mole at this point.
Well, I could talk to you for hours, Alex, but the time has come for us to wrap it up and save it for the next time. Uh, Extraordinary analysis, extraordinary insight. I'm grateful that you took time out to come and explain what is going on right now. In fact, God forbid something else might happen tomorrow, and I may have to be on the phone with you again. And so, thank you so much. I appreciate very much your coming on short notice and providing this extraordinary analysis to our audience. We have a global audience that is growing. We are very thankful to them. If you like what we are doing, please hit the like and subscribe button. Go to Substack, same name, Transition Protocol. Become a paid member, $5 a month, uh, about half the price of a coffee, and we will deliver this type of analysis twice a week inside your mailbox. So, Alex, do you want to say the final word?
Uh, well, the final word is that we should probably keep a positive outlook on what is happening in the world because somehow mysteriously the the rotten, putrid aspects that have always been present in the Western societies are coming into the light of day, and sunlight is the best disinfectant. The world has probably always been like this, or at least it has been for generations. the fact that we are coming face to face with it maybe maybe how do you call it, um, upsetting. It may be uh, demoralizing, but the fact that we now know things that we didn't know before is a massive positive, because it gives people to rethink what they believe, uh, reassess their positions, and we see those changes slowly taking shape in the world. My very strong conviction is that the only way we lose is if we surrender, if we capitulate, and if we allow the Epstein class to prevail. And I'm pretty sure that we're not going to do that, because we love our sons, we love our daughters, and we want to leave a better place for them. So, onwards and upwards, the future is bright.
Well, on this very positive note, which I totally share, because these people are stupid. I mean, that is my consensus. I've been very close to them for a long time. Not proud of that relationship, but they are not the brightest knives, in the kitchen. So they are stupid. In addition to being mean and horrible, and all of those things, and they make stupid decisions that result in catastrophes, like George W. Bush going to Iraq, going to Afghanistan, and attacking the Taliban to put Taliban back in power. All those kinds of things. So I share the enthusiasm. I share the positive news, and I want to leave our audience with that positive note, that God willing, all of their machinations are going to come to nothing, and 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 we will have the emergence of Iran. We will have the emergence of other countries that don't have this hegemonic, uh, ravenous desire to rule, other people. So thank you very much again, Alex. I shall see you again soon, hopefully. Hopefully not on this kind of a sour, developments that caused me to be in touch with you, to analyze what's going on. All right. Thank
Zulfiqar,
you.
thank you. Great pleasure to join you as always, and until the next time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'll hit the stop button.